I was fixing a carburetor at 2 in the morning when I heard her key in the lock. The sound echoed through our old Victorian house like a gunshot in the silence. My hands were covered in grease, my back ached from hunching over the workbench in my basement workshop, but I wasn't tired. Sleep had become a stranger to me these past few months. Lena's heels clicked against the hardwood floors upstairs, sharp, deliberate sounds that seemed to mock the quiet life we used to share. I could picture her stumbling slightly, trying to be quiet but failing, the way drunk people always do when they think they're being sneaky. I wiped my hands on a rag and checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. Her text from earlier still glowed on the screen. "Don't wait up. Not your business where I am." The basement door creaked open above me. "Jack? You down there?" Her voice had that particular quality it got when she'd been drinking. Too loud, too careful with the consonants. I'd learned to recognize it over the past 6 months, the way a sailor learns to read storm clouds. "Yeah, I'm here." I didn't look up from the motorcycle engine I was rebuilding. It was a 1973 Harley Sportster, and unlike my marriage, I actually had a chance of getting it running again. She made her way down the wooden stairs, each step deliberate and calculated. When I finally looked up, I saw her leaning against the door frame like she needed it for support. Her black dress was wrinkled, her lipstick smeared at one corner, and there was glitter on her left cheek that caught the light from my work lamp. "What are you doing up so late?" she asked, though we both knew the answer. I was up because she wasn't home. I was up because sleep had become impossible when I didn't know where my wife was or who she was with. "Couldn't sleep," I said, turning back to the engine. Figured I'd get some work done. She walked closer, and I caught the scent of gin and something else. Expensive cologne that wasn't mine. It mixed with her perfume in a way that made my stomach turn. "You don't have to wait up for me, you know," she said, her voice carrying that edge of irritation that had become her default tone when talking to me. "I'm a grown woman. I can take care of myself." I set down my wrench and finally looked at her properly. Lena was beautiful, had always been beautiful. Dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, green eyes that could stop traffic, and a smile that had made me forget my own name when we first met 8 years ago. But standing there in my workshop at 2 in the morning, reeking of another man's cologne, she looked like a stranger wearing my wife's face. "I wasn't waiting up," I lied. "I was working." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right. Working. At 2 in the morning. On a Friday night." "Some of us have to work for a living, Lena. My shop doesn't run itself." Her expression hardened. "Don't start with that blue-collar martyr crap, Jack. Just because you chose to fix motorcycles instead of getting a real job doesn't mean you get to guilt-trip me for having a social life." The words hit like a physical blow. I'd built my custom motorcycle shop from nothing, worked 16-hour days to make it profitable, and it had been paying our bills just fine until recently, until she decided that being married to a mechanic wasn't glamorous enough for her new image. "A social life," I repeated slowly. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. "What's that supposed to mean?" I could have backed down then, could have swallowed the words and pretended everything was normal, the way I'd been doing for months. Instead, I stood up and faced her. "It means that wives usually don't come home at 2 in the morning smelling like other men's cologne." The silence that followed was deafening. Lena's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, guilt, and then something cold and calculating that I'd never seen before. "You're being paranoid," she said finally, "and possessive, and frankly, it's not attractive. And you're being—" "What, Jack? What am I being?" She stepped closer, her voice rising. "Say it. Whatever you're thinking, just say it." But I couldn't. Not yet, because saying it out loud would make it real, and I wasn't ready for that kind of real. "Nothing," I said, turning back to my workbench. "Forget it." "No, I won't forget it." She grabbed my arm, forcing me to face her again. "You want to know where I was tonight? Fine. I was at the Blue Lantern with Nina and some friends from work. We had drinks, we danced, we had fun. Remember fun, Jack? That thing people do when they're not hiding in their basement playing with old motorcycles? The Blue Lantern was a trendy bar downtown, the kind of place where craft cocktails cost $20 and everyone was young and beautiful and successful. It wasn't the kind of place that welcomed guys like me with grease under their fingernails and calloused hands. "And the cologne?" I asked. She shrugged, but I caught the slight hesitation before she answered. "Crowded bar. People bump into each other. I probably brushed against someone on the dance floor." It was a reasonable explanation. Perfectly logical, and I knew she was lying. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" She seemed surprised by my calm response. "That's it? Just okay?" "What do you want me to say, Lena? If you say you were dancing with friends, then you were dancing with friends. She studied my face, looking for something, anger, jealousy, the fight she seemed to want, but I was too tired for a fight. Too tired and too suspicious and too aware that this conversation was just the tip of something much larger and more destructive. Good, she said finally, because I'm tired of feeling like I have to report to you every time I leave the house. We're married, not joined at the hip. She turned to leave, then paused at the bottom of the stairs. And Jack, even if I stay out all night, I'm not obligated to explain where I am. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. I looked up from the engine I was pretending to work on and met her eyes. For a moment, I saw something there, defiance, guilt, and maybe a challenge. She was testing me, pushing boundaries to see how far she could go before I pushed back. Okay, I said quietly. Neither am I. The next morning, I found Lena's phone charging on the kitchen counter. She was in the shower, singing something off-key, the way she always did when she was hungover, but trying to pretend she wasn't. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that even as I picked up the phone and saw that it wasn't locked. Lena had always been careless with technology, never bothering with passwords or security settings. It had been a running joke between us, how she trusted everyone and everything. Now I understood why she could afford to be so careless with her main phone. Because it was clean. Too clean. Her text messages were mostly work stuff and conversations with her sister in Portland. Her call log showed nothing suspicious. Her photos were all normal. Selfies, pictures of food, screenshots of articles she wanted to read later. But there was something wrong with the timeline. Gaps in her messages that didn't make sense. Conversations that seemed to be missing pieces. And her location services had been turned off 3 months ago, right around the time she started staying out late. I set the phone back down exactly where I'd found it and made coffee. When Lena came downstairs 20 minutes later, wrapped in her silk robe with her hair still damp, she kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. "Morning, baby," she said, reaching for the coffee I'd poured her. "Thanks for this." "No problem." I watched her over the rim of my mug. "Sleep okay?" "Like a rock." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry about last night. I was a little drunk." "A little?" She laughed, and for a moment she sounded like the woman I'd married. "Okay, a lot drunk. Nina kept buying rounds, and you know how she gets." I knew Nina, Lena's friend from college, a real estate agent who specialized in expensive properties and expensive drama. She was the kind of woman who thrived on chaos and seemed to collect other people's secrets like some people collected stamps. "What time did you get home?" I asked casually. "I don't know. Late. You were already asleep?" Another lie, delivered with the same casual smile. I nodded and finished my coffee. "I've got to get to the shop. Mrs. Henderson is picking up her husband's Triumph today." "Okay, I'll probably be late tonight too. Nina wants to check out that new wine bar on Congress Street." "Sure thing." I kissed her forehead and grabbed my keys. Have fun." But instead of driving to my shop, I parked around the corner and waited. 30 minutes later, Lena left the house in her BMW, dressed for work in a sharp business suit that probably cost more than most people made in a week. I followed her at a distance, feeling like a character in a bad movie. She drove to her office downtown, a sleek building that housed the marketing firm where she worked as an account executive. I watched her walk inside, confident and professional, every inch the successful businesswoman she'd worked so hard to become. Then I drove to my shop and tried to pretend everything was normal. Mitch was already there when I arrived, bent over the engine of a vintage Indian motorcycle that belonged to a collector from Boston. Mitch had been working for me for 3 years, and he was the kind of guy who could rebuild an engine blindfolded and never ask questions about why his boss looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Morning, boss," he said without looking up. "How's the home front?" "Peachy," I said, pulling on my work coveralls. "What's the story with the Indian?" "Owner wants it completely rebuilt. Money's no object, he says. Wants it to look exactly like it did in 1947, but run like it's 2023. Don't they all?" I grabbed my tools and tried to lose myself in work, but my mind kept wandering back to Lena's phone and the gaps in her messages and the way she'd looked at me when she said she didn't owe me an explanation. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading it, thinking it was spam, but something made me open it. "You don't know me, but I think you should know that your wife was at the Blue Lantern last night. She wasn't alone." My hands went cold. I read the message 3 times, looking for some sign that it was a joke or a mistake, but the timestamp showed it had been sent just a few minutes ago, and there was something about the tone that felt genuine. I typed back, "Who is this?" The response came quickly. "Someone who's been where you are. Check the parking lot behind the bar around 11 p.m. tonight if you want to see for yourself." I stared at the phone for a long time, my mind racing. It could be a setup. It could be someone playing a cruel joke, or it could be exactly what it seemed like, a warning from a stranger who'd recognized something familiar in my situation. The rest of the day dragged by like a prison sentence. I tried to focus on work, but every few minutes I found myself checking my phone, rereading the mysterious message, and wondering what I was going to find in that parking lot. At 6 o'clock, I called Lena. "Hey, baby," she answered on the second ring. "What's up?" "Just checking in. You still going out with Nina tonight?" "Yeah, probably. Why?" "No reason. Just wanted to know if I should wait dinner." "Don't wait. We'll probably grab something while we're out." "Okay, have fun." "Thanks. Love you." "Love you too." But as I hung up, I realized I wasn't sure if either of us meant it anymore. At 10:30 p.m., I parked my truck 3 blocks away from the Blue Lantern and walked through the maze of downtown streets. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and the distant promise of winter. Portland's Old Port District was alive with Friday night energy. Couples walking hand in hand, groups of friends bar hopping, the usual collection of tourists and locals mixing in the glow of streetlights and neon signs. The Blue Lantern sat on the corner of Exchange and Federal Streets, its blue neon sign casting an electric glow over the sidewalk. Through the large windows, I could see the usual crowd, young professionals, college students, and the kind of people who considered craft cocktails a hobby rather than a habit. I found the parking lot behind the building and settled into the shadows between 2 dumpsters, feeling ridiculous and desperate and angry all at once. This wasn't who I was supposed to be. I wasn't the kind of man who hid in parking lots spying on his wife. But then again, Lena wasn't supposed to be the kind of woman who came home at 2 a.m. smelling like another man's cologne. At 11:15, I saw them. Lena emerged from the bar's back exit, laughing at something the man beside her had said. He was tall and lean, wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that screamed trust fund, designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, shoes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. His hair was perfectly styled, and even from a distance, I could see the confidence in the way he carried himself. But it wasn't his appearance that made my stomach drop. It was the way Lena looked at him. She touched his arm when she laughed, leaned into him when he whispered something in her ear, let him guide her toward a black Mercedes parked in the far corner of the lot, with his hand resting on the small of her back. I recognized that look, that body language, those intimate little gestures. They were the same ones she'd used with me when we were first dating, when everything was new and exciting and full of possibility. They stopped beside the Mercedes, and he pressed her against the driver's side door. What happened next made my hands clench into fists. He kissed her, not a friendly peck or an accidental brush of lips, but a deep, passionate kiss that went on for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Lena's arms went around his neck, her fingers tangling in his expensive haircut, and she kissed him back with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from her in months. When they finally broke apart, she said something that made him laugh. He opened the car door for her, and she slid into the passenger seat like she belonged there. Like this was normal. Like this was something they'd done many times before. I watched the Mercedes pull out of the parking lot and disappear into the night, taking my wife and the last of my illusions with it. My phone buzzed, a text from Lena. "Staying at Nina's tonight. Don't wait up." I stood in that parking lot for another 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd just seen. Part of me wanted to drive to Nina's apartment and confront them. Part of me wanted to go home and pretend this had never happened. But mostly, I just felt empty. The mysterious texter had been right. Now I knew for sure what I'd only suspected before. My wife was having an affair, and she was lying about it with the kind of casual ease that suggested this wasn't her first time. I drove home through empty streets, my mind spinning with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Did Nina know? Did everyone know except me? The house felt different when I walked in, bigger and emptier and somehow foreign. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my kitchen, staring at the wedding photo on the refrigerator. We looked so young in that picture, so happy and naive and convinced that love was enough to carry us through anything. My phone buzzed again, another message from the unknown number. "I'm sorry you had to see that, but you needed to know." This time, I called the number instead of texting back. "Hello?" The voice was female, older, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "This is Jack Sullivan. You've been texting me." "Yes, I thought you might call eventually." "Who are you?" A pause. "My name is Carol Brennan. My husband used to meet his girlfriend in that same parking lot." "Used to?" Before I divorced him and took half of everything he owned. Her voice was matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather. That man your wife was with tonight. His name is Evan Brooks. He's a real estate agent. Expensive tastes, family money, thinks he's God's gift to married women. I wrote down the name. How do you know all this? Because he was sleeping with my husband, too. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Not like that, she said quickly. They were business partners. Evan would find married women, usually ones with money or successful husbands, and my husband would help him figure out how to leverage the relationships. They had a whole system worked out. A system? Think about it. Your wife works in marketing, right? Probably makes good money, has access to client information, knows a lot of successful people. She was right. Lena's job put her in contact with some of Portland's wealthiest residents. She managed marketing campaigns for luxury car dealerships, high-end restaurants, boutique hotels, the kind of businesses that catered to people with serious money. What kind of leverage? I asked, though I was starting to understand. Information, contacts, access to social circles they couldn't reach on their own, and sometimes, if the woman was married to someone particularly successful, she trailed off. What? Sometimes they'd push for more, encourage the woman to leave her husband, make sure she got a good settlement in the divorce. Evan specialized in representing women in high-asset divorces. He'd get them as clients, help them hide assets, make sure they came out ahead. Then he'd take his cut and move on to the next mark. My bourbon glass was empty. I couldn't remember drinking it. You think that's what's happening here? I think your wife is being played by a professional, Mr. Sullivan. The question is whether she knows it or not. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen until the sun came up, thinking about everything Carol had told me. If she was right, then Lena wasn't just cheating. She was being manipulated by someone who made a living out of destroying marriages. But that raised an even more disturbing question. Was Lena an innocent victim being seduced by a con artist, or was she a willing participant in whatever scheme Evan Brooks was running? Either way, I realized, my marriage was over. The only question now was how much it was going to cost me. Saturday morning brought the kind of crisp autumn day that usually made me grateful to live in Maine. The maple tree in our backyard was an explosion of red and gold, and the air smelled like wood smoke and possibility. Under normal circumstances, Lena and I would have spent the day raking leaves and planning our weekend, maybe driving up to Freeport to walk around LL Bean and pretend we were going to buy camping gear we'd never use. Instead, I spent it learning everything I could about Evan Brooks. Lena came home around 10, looking tired, but trying to hide it behind oversized sunglasses and too much makeup. She kissed my cheek and made a show of being hungover, complaining about how Nina had kept buying wine and how she was getting too old to stay up all night drinking. I'm going to take a bath, and then maybe we can do something together, she suggested, but I could hear the obligation in her voice. Maybe drive up the coast? Sounds good, I lied. Take your time. I've got some paperwork to catch up on. While she soaked in the tub, I used her laptop to research Evan Brooks. It wasn't hard to find information about him. He had the kind of online presence that successful people cultivate like a garden. His real estate website showed a portfolio of expensive properties and testimonials from satisfied clients. His LinkedIn profile listed an impressive education and a series of increasingly prestigious positions. His Instagram was full of photos from charity events and gallery openings and exotic vacations. But it was his Facebook page that told the real story. Scrolling through 2 years of posts, I found a pattern. Every few months, there were photos of Evan with different women at various social events. Beautiful women, well-dressed women, women who wore wedding rings in some photos, but not in others. The comments on these photos were telling, lots of female friends making jokes about how lucky these women were, how charming Evan was, how he was such a catch. I recognized 3 of the women from local news stories about high-profile divorces. All 3 had been represented by the same law firm. All 3 had received unusually generous settlements, and all 3 had disappeared from Evan's social media after their divorces were finalized. My phone rang. Carol Brennan. Have you had a chance to think about what we discussed? She asked without preamble. I've been doing some research. You're right about the pattern. I thought you might see it once you started looking. Listen, I know this is hard, but you need to start protecting yourself. Financially, I mean. What do you suggest? First, document everything. Every late night, every lie, every time she comes home smelling like someone else. Keep a journal with dates and times. Take pictures if you can. Pictures? Of her when she comes home. The way she looks, what she's wearing, any evidence that she's been with someone else. I know it sounds awful, but you're going to need proof if this goes to court. Court? Divorce court, Mr. Sullivan. Because that's where this is heading, whether you want to admit it or not. She was right, of course, but hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that was almost physically painful. What else? I asked. Secure your assets. Make sure she can't clean out your bank accounts or run up debt in your name. Change your passwords, check your credit reports, that sort of thing, and start moving money to an account she doesn't know about. Is that legal? As long as it's your money and you're not hiding it permanently, yes. You're just protecting yourself from being left with nothing if she decides to make a run for it. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the day following Carol's advice. I opened a new bank account at a different bank and transferred half of our savings. I changed the passwords on all of my personal accounts. I started a journal, documenting everything I could remember about Lena's behavior over the past few months. Writing it all down made the pattern even more obvious. The late nights had started in July. The attitude changes had begun around the same time. She'd started dressing differently, buying expensive clothes, and getting her hair done more often. She'd also started working late more frequently, claiming new client demands and important projects. But when I checked our credit card statements, I found charges that didn't match her stories. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, hotel bar charges in the middle of the afternoon, purchases at lingerie stores and perfume counters. The evidence was overwhelming, but I still needed more. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. That evening, while Lena was getting ready for another girls' night out, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. I was going to follow her again, but this time I was going to find out where the night ended. "You look beautiful," I told her as she checked her makeup one final time. And she did, stunning in a black dress that I'd never seen before. Her hair styled in loose waves, her lips painted the color of expensive wine. "Thanks, baby." She kissed me goodbye, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Don't wait up. Nina wants to try that new cocktail place on Commercial Street. Have fun. Be safe." "Always am." But as I watched her drive away, I knew that safety was the last thing on her mind. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than hurt and confusion. I felt angry. Following Lena became easier the second time. I knew her patterns now, understood how she moved through the city when she thought no one was watching. She drove to the Blue Lantern first, just like she'd said, and I watched through the windows as she met Nina and two other women I didn't recognize. For about an hour, it looked like exactly what she'd claimed. Friends having drinks and catching up. They sat at a high-top table near the bar, laughing and talking and taking selfies like women do when they're having a good time. But at 10:30, everything changed. Evan Brooks walked into the bar like he owned it, scanning the room until his eyes found Lena. Even from across the street, I could see her entire demeanor shift. Her posture straightened, her smile became more animated, and she started touching her hair the way she used to do when we were first dating and she was nervous. Nina and the other women exchanged looks. Not surprised looks, but knowing ones. They were in on it. Whatever was happening between Lena and Evan, her friends were actively helping her hide it. 20 minutes later, Lena excused herself from the table and headed toward the bathroom. Evan followed a few moments later, disappearing down the same hallway. They were gone for 15 minutes. When they returned, Lena's lipstick was gone, and her hair was slightly mussed. Evan looked satisfied in a way that made me want to put my fist through his perfect face. At 11:45, Lena said goodbye to her friends and left through the front door. Evan waited 5 minutes, then followed. They met in the parking lot behind the building, just like before, but this time I was ready with my phone. I took pictures of them kissing, pictures of him helping her into his car, pictures of the license plate as they drove away. Then I followed them. They drove to a boutique hotel on the waterfront, the kind of place that charged $500 a night and catered to people who wanted privacy and luxury in equal measure. I watched from the parking garage across the street as they walked into the lobby together, his hand on her back, her head on his shoulder. They didn't come back out. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, taking pictures of the hotel entrance and waiting for something to happen. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with the text I'd been expecting. "Staying at Nina's again. See you in the morning." The lie was so casual, so practiced, that I wondered how many times she'd used it before. I drove home and added everything to my journal. Times, locations, photographs. The evidence was overwhelming now. Lena was having an affair with Evan Brooks. She was lying about it constantly, and her friends were helping her cover it up. But I still didn't know what Evan's endgame was. Was this just a simple affair, or was Carol right about the larger scheme? I got my answer the next morning. Lena came home at 9 a.m., looking like she'd spent the night in a hotel room instead of on Nina's couch. She was wearing the same dress, but different underwear. I could tell because the lines were different under the fabric. Her hair was freshly styled, and she smelled like expensive hotel soap. "Morning, baby," she said, kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. "How was your night?" "Quiet. How was Nina's?" Oh, you know Nina. She wanted to stay up all night talking about her latest dating disaster. Lena poured herself coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. I'm exhausted. I bet. Something in my tone made her look up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just that staying up all night talking can be tiring. She studied my face for a moment, and I saw a flicker of something, suspicion, maybe, or guilt. But then she smiled and changed the subject. I've been thinking, she said. Maybe we should take a vacation. Get away somewhere warm for a week or two. We haven't done that in forever. A vacation sounds nice. When were you thinking? I don't know. Maybe after the holidays? I might have some time off in January. Might? Well, there's a big project coming up at work. A new client who wants to completely rebrand their business. It's going to be a lot of work, but the commission could be huge. What kind of business? Real estate development. They're planning a luxury resort up near Bar Harbor. Very high-end, very exclusive. The truth revealed. The pieces clicked into place so clearly that I almost laughed out loud. Evan Brooks wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was using her to get access to her marketing expertise and her client connections, and Lena, whether she knew it or not, was helping him develop a business that would probably make them both very wealthy. That sounds like a big opportunity, I said carefully. It is. The client is really impressive. Young, successful, knows exactly what he wants. I think this could be the project that really takes my career to the next level. What's his name? Evan. Evan Brooks. He's a real estate agent, but he's looking to expand into development. He has some amazing ideas. The casual way she said his name, like he was just another client instead of the man she'd spent the night with, was breathtaking in its audacity. Sounds like you two work well together, I said. We do. He's very inspiring. That was when I knew for sure that Lena wasn't an innocent victim being manipulated by a con artist. She was a willing participant in whatever scheme they were running, and she was planning to use our marriage as cover until she was ready to make her move. The realization was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. For weeks, I'd been torturing myself with questions about what I'd done wrong, how I could fix our marriage, whether there was still hope for us. Now I knew the truth. There was nothing to fix because there was nothing left to save. I'm happy for you, I said, and meant it. I hope it works out exactly the way you want it to. She smiled, completely missing the subtext. Thanks, baby. I think it's going to change everything. She was right about that. It was going to change everything, just not the way she thought. The next morning, I started quietly gathering evidence. I'd already installed the keylogger on her laptop weeks earlier, something I'd done in a moment of desperation, hating myself for it. Now I used it without guilt. I downloaded every email, every text screenshot, every shared file between her and Evan. I traced the money, the marketing consulting fees that were really just transfers to a joint account they'd opened in both their names. I photographed bank statements, contract drafts, even the property listings Evan was eyeing with her help. By the end of the week, I had a folder thick enough to bury any defense she might try to muster. I didn't confront her yet. I wanted to be certain, and I wanted to be prepared. I met with my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Carla who specialized in high-asset divorces. She reviewed everything and whistled low. This is fraud, Jack. Not just adultery, actual financial misconduct. She's commingling marital funds with a third party for personal gain. We can freeze accounts, demand full disclosure, and if we play it right, she walks away with nothing. I nodded. I don't want to destroy her. I just want her out of my life. Carla smiled thinly. Sometimes the cleanest break is the sharpest. I filed for divorce the following Monday. No fault, but with a long list of exhibits attached. Proof of the affair, proof of the financial entanglement. I requested temporary spousal support for myself. Ironic, but legally sound given her higher income and immediate access to all joint accounts. Lena came home that evening to find the papers on the kitchen table. She froze in the doorway, purse still in hand. What is this? Divorce papers, I said calmly. Sign them, or we go to court and everyone sees what's in the exhibits. Her face drained of color. Jack, we can talk about this. We've talked enough. You've been using our marriage as a stepping stone for your new life with Evan. I'm done being the backdrop. She tried to cry, to plead, to promise it was a mistake, but I'd heard it all before, in her voice, in her texts, in the way she'd smiled at me while planning her escape. I moved out the next day into a small apartment downtown. I kept the house. She could fight for it if she wanted, but the judge would see the evidence. The court froze the joint accounts pending hearing. Evan's big project stalled when the funding dried up. 2 months later, the divorce was final. Lena got half the equity in the house minus her consulting fees that were deemed marital waste. She lost her biggest clients when word spread. People don't like working with someone who's been caught in a fraud scheme. Evan disappeared from the real estate scene. Last I heard, he was back in sales, struggling. Lena tried to rebuild. She moved in with her sister, took a lower-paying job at a boutique agency. She reached out once, asking if we could meet for coffee. I declined. I kept my life simple. I focused on my own work, my friends, the quiet routines that had been drowned out by the chaos of her betrayal. I started dating again, slowly, nothing serious, but the possibility felt good. One evening, I ran into her at a coffee shop. She looked smaller, tired. She offered a weak smile. "You look good, Jack." "I feel good," I said. "I'm sorry for everything." "I know." I walked away without looking back. The anger was gone. The hurt had faded. What remained was clarity. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is recognize when the story is over and stop writing chapters for people who've already turned the page. I'd turned mine. And the next one was all mine to write. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my marriage disintegrate with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing an experiment. Lena's lies became more elaborate and less believable. Her absences grew longer and more frequent. Her attitude toward me shifted from dismissive to openly contemptuous. She was getting careless, confident that I was too naive or too trusting to figure out what was happening. She left her laptop open with emails from Evan discussing their business meetings. She came home wearing jewelry I hadn't bought her. She started talking about our future in ways that didn't include me. "I've been thinking about getting my own place," she said one evening over dinner. "Just temporarily, while I'm working on this big project. Evan thinks it would be better if I was closer to downtown, easier to meet with clients and investors." Evan thinks a lot of things, doesn't he? She looked up from her salad, fork halfway to her mouth. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that he seems to have a lot of opinions about your life." "He's a client, Jack. A very important client. Of course he has opinions about how we work together." "Is that what you're calling it?" The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. For a moment, I thought she might finally tell me the truth. Instead, she set down her fork and gave me the kind of look she usually reserved for particularly slow waiters. "I don't like what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Are you sleeping with Evan Brooks?" The silence stretched so long I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Lena's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, indignation, and finally something cold and calculating. "How dare you?" she said quietly. "How dare you accuse me of cheating?" "I'm not accusing you. I'm asking you." "It's the same thing." "No, it's not. An accusation assumes I already know the answer. A question means I'm giving you a chance to tell me the truth." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I don't have to listen to this. I don't have to defend myself against your paranoid fantasies." "So that's a no?" "That's a go to hell, Jack. I've never cheated on you, and the fact that you would even ask shows how little you think of me." The lie was so bold, so complete, that I almost admired it. She was looking me straight in the eye and denying something I'd seen with my own eyes, photographed with my own phone. "Okay," I said. "I believe you." The response clearly wasn't what she'd expected. She stood there for a moment, uncertain how to proceed now that I'd backed down. "Good," she said finally, "because this conversation is insulting and I don't want to have it again." "We won't," I promised. "I'm sorry I doubted you." She relaxed slightly, thinking she'd won. "It's just, this project is really important to me, Jack. Evan is offering me opportunities I've never had before. I need you to support me, not question every decision I make." "I understand, and you're right. You don't owe me explanations about your work or your clients or how you spend your time." "Exactly." She sat back down, satisfied that she'd put me in my place. "I'm a grown woman. I can make my own choices." "You absolutely can." We finished dinner in relative peace, and afterward Lena went upstairs to pack for another business trip, this one a weekend in Boston to meet with potential investors. I helped her carry her suitcase to the car and kissed her goodbye like a loving, trusting husband. Then I went inside and made 3 phone calls. The first was to a divorce attorney Carol had recommended, a woman who specialized in high-asset cases and had a reputation for being both thorough and ruthless. The second was to a private investigator who could document Lena's activities more professionally than I could with my phone camera. The third was to the HR department at Lena's company. "I'd like to speak to someone about employee ethics," I told the woman who answered. "I have reason to believe one of your account executives is using company resources for personal business." It took some convincing, but eventually I was transferred to the compliance department. I explained that my wife was using her position to help a client develop business plans that seemed to involve undisclosed personal relationships. I provided dates, names, and enough specific information to trigger an internal investigation. I didn't mention the affair directly. I didn't need to. Companies took conflicts of interest very seriously, especially when they involved potential financial impropriety. By Monday morning, Lena's perfect little world was going to start crumbling. But that was just the beginning. While she was in Boston with Evan, I spent the weekend implementing the rest of my plan. I moved the remaining money from our joint accounts to my personal account, money I'd earned from my business and was legally entitled to protect. I canceled the credit cards she'd been using to finance her new lifestyle. I changed the locks on the house and had the utilities switched to my name only. Most importantly, I called the job offer I'd received 3 months earlier, the one from a custom motorcycle shop in Austin that wanted me to manage their new location. The offer I'd turned down because Lena said she couldn't leave Portland, couldn't abandon her career just when it was taking off. "Is the position still available?" I asked the owner. "Jack, good to hear from you." "Yeah, we're still looking. Had a couple candidates, but nobody with your experience. You interested?" "Very. When would you need me to start?" "How soon can you get here?" 2 weeks? "Perfect. I'll email you the paperwork tonight." When Lena returned from Boston on Sunday evening, glowing with satisfaction and full of stories about successful meetings and promising connections, I was waiting in the living room with a glass of bourbon and a folder full of documents. "How was your trip?" I asked. "Amazing. Better than I hoped. Evan introduced me to some incredible people, and I think we're really going to make this work." She dropped her suitcase and came over to kiss me. "I missed you." "I missed you too." I handed her the folder. "We need to talk." She opened it and went very still. The top document was a petition for divorce, already signed by me and notarized. Underneath were copies of all the photographs I'd taken, bank statements showing her expenditures, and a detailed timeline of her activities over the past month. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's the truth, Lena. All of it. Every lie you've told, every night you've spent with him, every dollar you've spent on your affair." Her face went white, then red, then white again. "You followed me." "I did." "You spied on me." "I documented your activities, yes." "You son of a bitch." She threw the folder at me, papers scattering across the floor. "You paranoid, controlling son of a bitch." "I'm also filing a complaint with your company about your relationship with Evan Brooks. Using company resources to develop a personal relationship with a client is a fireable offense, especially when that relationship involves potential conflicts of interest." "You wouldn't." "I already did. They'll probably start their investigation tomorrow." She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. "You're destroying my life." "No, Lena, you destroyed your life. I'm just making sure you don't destroy mine in the process. I love him." The words came out like a confession, raw and desperate. "I love Evan, and he loves me. We're going to build something together, something real." "I'm sure you are. Just not with my money or my house or my credit." "This is my house, too." "Not anymore. Check the deed. I bought this place before we got married, and Maine isn't a community property state. You're welcome to fight me for it in court, but I think you'll find that adultery affects property settlements." She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. "You can't do this. You can't just throw away 8 years of marriage." "I'm not throwing it away. You already did that when you decided Evan Brooks was worth more than the vows you made to me." I stood up and walked toward the door, stepping carefully around the scattered papers. "Your things are packed. They're in the garage. You have until tomorrow morning to pick them up." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know, Lena. Maybe Evan can help you figure that out. After all, you said he's very inspiring." I left her crying in the living room and went upstairs to pack my own bags. I had a flight to Austin in the morning and a new life waiting for me in Texas. Behind me, I could hear her on the phone, sobbing into the receiver. "Evan? Something terrible has happened. I need you." But Evan Brooks, it turned out, was much better at seducing married women than he was at dealing with the consequences. When Lena showed up at his apartment that night with her suitcases and her tears, he told her he needed space to think, and suggested she stay with Nina for a while. By the time Lena's company fired her for ethics violations, Evan had already moved on to his next mark, a wealthy widow who owned a chain of boutique hotels and had no idea what she was getting into. 6 months later, I got a letter from Lena's attorney. She was contesting the divorce, claiming emotional distress and demanding alimony. But by then, I was established in Austin, running a successful business and dating a veterinarian named Sarah who thought motorcycles were sexy. and honesty was non-negotiable. I sent the letter to my attorney and went back to work on a 1969 Mustang that belonged to a local collector. The engine was a mess, but it had good bones. With enough patience and the right tools, I could make it run like new. Some things were worth saving, others weren't.